A software developer, a project manager, and their boss are walking to work one morning when they come across a lamp. And they pick up the lamp, and they give it a little rub on the side, and much to their surprise, out pops a genie. And the genie looks at them and says, "Today, my friends, is your lucky day. Each of you have one wish, and I'll make those wishes come true." The software developer looks at the genie and says, "Genie, I want you to transport me right now to the Bahamas, where I'm going to be snorkeling in the crystal clear Caribbean Sea without a care in the world." And the genie says, "Okay, your wish is my command," and off goes the software developer. The project manager looks at the genie and says, "Genie, I want you to transport me to Hawaii, where I'm going to be getting a massage on the beach at sunset, and I want there to be an infinite supply of pina coladas." Finally, the boss looks at the genie and says, "Genie, I want the project manager and software developer back here by lunch." Hi, everybody. I'm David Horowitz, CEO and co-founder of Retrium. We make software to help you run better agile retrospectives, especially if you have a distributed team. I'm joined today by Matias Nino, agile project manager at REI Systems. This may not be working. There we go. We're going to talk to you today about food. We just got back from lunch, and so in particular, I want to talk about onions. There are 4 layers to the business agility onion that I'm going to talk about today. And at the core of the business agility onion is an agile practice that all of you have heard of. 83% of us practice, but very few of us are effectively deploying up the value chain to business agility. So without further ado, let's start peeling back the business agility onion. The question we have to ask ourselves is, well, what is the primary driver of business agility? Fortunately for us, we have Steve Denning in the house. Where's Steve? Or maybe not. He was in the house, and he's identified 3 laws that most of us are probably familiar with at this point. So the law of the small team, the law of the customer, and the law of the network. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm not going to get into details of what these 3 laws are. Suffice to say they're critical and important. Please talk to him if you haven't heard of them yet. What I am going to focus on, however, is one truth that underpins and cross-cuts across these 3 laws. And to do that, I'm going to tell you a story of 2 companies. They're not Pepsi and Coke. They're not Nintendo and Sega. And they're not Microsoft and Apple, but they are 2 companies locked in eternal battle against each other in the vegetable industry, continuing our food theme. And they are 2 imaginary companies called Company Alfalfa Sprouts and Company Broccoli. Now, these companies are identical in almost every single way. They serve the same consumer, the health-conscious eater who doesn't care about how food tastes. And they're identical in every way except for one, which is that at Company Alfalfa Sprouts, let's say, employees don't really like what they're doing. They're not too enthused about work. And the way we talk about this in the industry is active disengagement. Versus Company Broccoli, where people love what they do. And they go in enthused, and they just love working for this company. They are an engaged workforce. Now imagine into this setup, we have a new market entrant, a new vegetable that's going to compete head-to-head with alfalfa sprouts and broccoli. And it's a vegetable that a recent scientific survey said 75% of people hate. And 25% of people, the other 25% of people, are lying. But that's okay, that vegetable is kale. Now, the CEOs of both companies have told their employees, we have to react to the new threat to our business lines. So we're going to change our product offering. We're going to change our marketing strategy. Which of these 2 companies do you think is more apt to be able to respond to the CEO's new direction? Clearly, we know it's Company Broccoli, right? So the first layer of the business agility onion we need to focus on is employee engagement. Without engagement, you will not have business agility. OK, let's peel once more and ask ourselves, what drives employee engagement? Let's return to our story. So, between these 2 companies, both CEOs have tried to drive employee engagement at their companies. And at Company Alfalfa Sprouts, they're going about it by offering some benefits, things like free massages, chocolates, free lunches, unlimited vacation. We all love these things, but do they drive engagement in your jobs? Let's think about this conference right now. We just got back from a great lunch, and for many of us, it was in fact free. Our employer probably paid for us to be here. But does the fact that there was a free lunch today, as much as we appreciate it, have any impact whatsoever on your engagement during the talks at the conference? So why do we think differently about our jobs? It's the same exact story. Free lunches, we appreciate them. They don't drive engagement. In contrast, at company Broccoli, they may or may not offer these benefits. It's besides the point. What matters is that they have an environment in which ideas flourish from the bottom up, that people feel like their voice matters. Thank you. That's not working too well. So that, in our industry, we call something called employee voice. So when you have a voice, especially for a knowledge worker, it's a key driver of employee engagement. If you don't feel like your ideas matter, you're not going to be engaged with what you're doing. So that's the next layer of the business agility onion. So let's peel one more time and ask ourselves, well, what's a key driver of employee voice? Returning to our story, at company Alfalfa Sprouts, the CEO has instituted 3 policies. We're going to have suggestion boxes at all bosses' offices. We're going to have an annual employee survey, and we're going to have town halls. Does this help drive voice? No, but we all do them anyway, right? Why? So suggestion boxes, when was the last time that actually worked? True story, I had a boss once when I was working for a big international bank who told me, I love suggestion boxes because when people put the paper in there, I can take it out, crumple it up, and throw it in the trash. And he told that to me, and I worked for him. Okay? At annual employee surveys, there's information lag. Cycle time is too long. I identify an impediment. It might be a year or more before it's fixed. So those don't work either. Town halls have a problem as well. Who speaks up in town halls? It's the extreme extroverts. No one else has the confidence or the ability to speak truth to power at town halls. So these things are fine. Go ahead and do them, but they don't drive voice. What does? Well, it turns out there are 2 rules that are necessary for employee voice to be effective. Rule number 1, feedback must be regular, meaning that when you're an individual contributor on the team, you have to have the chance to provide feedback, provide your ideas up the chain at any point in time, ideally on demand. Equally important, but much more difficult, is rule number 2, which is that responses must be timely and impactful. When I provide feedback, if I have to wait 6 months to hear back, that's not voice. That's me shouting into the ether, the tree's falling, but no one's hearing it, right? So those are the 2 key rules to enable employee voice. And when you think about them, they start to sound a lot like agile. Feedback on a regular basis, responses being close to the customer, timely and impactful, it's a lot like agile. When it comes to agility, in fact, the more you think about it, the more you realize that there is one key part of agility that is the primary driver of employee voice. And it is the seemingly simple, oft underused and misunderstood team retrospective. Team retrospectives satisfy both of those conditions. Condition number 1, feedback must be regular. When you run a retrospective on a regular basis, it gives the team a chance to provide feedback on demand. Rule number 2 is that responses must be timely and impactful. And this is where most of us fall. But when done properly, an organization should be able to be responsive to the retrospective feedback in such a fashion. Now, if I were you, I'd be putting on my skeptic's hat right now. Because we probably all run retrospectives. But how many of us are actually seeing that value chain in action? Anyone raise their hands? A few, right? So this is where we fall down. And this is where I'm going to turn the mic over to Matias to tell you a story from his experience at REI Systems.
Thank you, David. So REI Systems, we're not the IT department of the famous Outdoor Outfitter. We're our own company, and we build software that helps government be awesome and helps them with their grants management and be more open and transparent to the public and to other organizations. And today I'm here to tell you a story about how we kind of stumbled upon enterprise agility in a large government program. So that should be surprising. I think someone yesterday said that the final frontier of agility was the financial sector, but if you ask me, the final frontier of agility is government. And so this is the environment that we work in, or kind of gives you a picture of that. And it's a large-scale program. There's 10 different teams trying to work together, and 6 different vendors, all kind of reporting to this program management business federal worker layer that, it's all made up of federal product owners, and, and each team kind of has its own work stream. And it's, this gives you a picture of what it looks like during release planning, which is once every 7 sprints. But the other part of the time, each of the vendors with their own teams are disconnected, geographically separated in a distributed kind of environment. And so this made it very challenging at first because teams were kind of isolated. They weren't really that connected to the business. And so, we practiced Scrum. We ran retrospectives. We discovered this awesome tool, Retrium, that lets us facilitate retrospectives even if we are distributed. And so out of those, we had these, impediments come out that the team had no control over. And trying to remove those impediments when in this environment, when the team had no control of them, looked a little bit like this. So it was wrangling. Scrum Master had to go out there in the wild and try and wrangle the right person, get the right approvals, follow up with them, in this chaotic environment, and it was incredibly difficult. And by the time that we were able to actually do something about it, or something actually got done, it was, the team had already forgotten about it. They had moved on, and they had, they created their own workaround, and what happened here was that the teams were very disengaged, and they were, just worried about their own little bubble. And anytime some impediment came up, they thought this, they immediately thought, this will never be resolved. We got to figure something else out. And until one day, we ran into this impediment that changed everything. So this platform team kind of came out with this new continuous delivery deployment pipeline that the team felt was a lot slower. It slowed down their development. It slowed down their deployments, and it was just the most demoralizing thing that happened. And when we discussed it at the retrospective, they all kind of voted with these stars on there. And when we discussed it, we thought, how can we actually go and get this heard by the business? And you can't just call up someone in government and say something is slow. They'll hang up and say, yeah, everything is slow, and hang up. And so, no big deal. And so we thought, how can we at least broadcast this or put this in front of their faces? And we had this concept of the information radiator that's part of our agile toolkit. And we thought, how can we create an information radiator that just puts these issues that we're facing right in front of management? And we thought about it, and we thought, hey, management, the business is always calling us up whenever they read something in Confluence. They call us up about our metrics, all the things that we measure. They call us up about things they read on Confluence. It's like they read Confluence like it's the daily newspaper in their, off downtown DC in their cubicles. That's what they read. That's how they get their information. And so we thought, let's put this radiator on Confluence about what our external impediments are. And amazingly enough, they picked up on it. They realized that the new deployment pipeline was really slow. They called up the team. They put pressure on them. And I'm grateful that we have leaders that were able to, when they saw a problem, they kind of said, let's move this mountain for them, and they all talked about it. And so that was awesome. The teams were really happy about that. But what happened next really blew my mind. Was that it led to an explosion of ideas for improvement. So I had, our tool lets us track all the action items through the whole history. The oldest are at the bottom, and then the newest are at the top. And I went and highlighted what were the external facing impediments and action items that the team identified and decided that needed to be fixed. And right at the red line, when we actually they fixed the pipeline for us, immediately there was an explosion of more ideas for improvement. And this kind of started this feedback cycle where the team would vote on topics and discuss them. In one instance, we had dependencies, and the team said, these services we depend on, when they're being deployed, we're having issues, it slows us down. And so the business went and responded by implementing service mocking in the development environments for them. There was another issue where the teams felt, if we were able to chat online with the other teams in the program, we could actually get things done quicker. And so the program went and actually bought Slack for the entire program, which was awesome. Thank you for them doing that. And they were able to communicate better, faster. And then it kind of went into external communications with the users and the external vendors, where the team felt, it would be a good idea if we were included on all these communications going out to the users and to external vendors so that we were in the know about these things. And the business responded by increasing that inclusivity of the development teams into these external communications. And today we are a really happy team. I love this picture because, when I look in their eyes, I see the happiness there. And to me, I'd like to think that a big part of the reason why they're this happy is because they are engaged. They know they have a voice, and they know that they're able to make an impact of business outcomes on the business. So that's where we are today in our journey.
So how can we abstract some lessons from Matias' story at REI Systems? There's a couple of takeaways to end the talk. The first is that we have to get rid of the mantra, what happens in retros stays in retros. Now, it is absolutely true that in the retrospective, you need psychological safety, and you need a space for private conversation. But at the end of the retrospective, it is just as important that we ask ourselves intentionally, what are the things we need help on, that we need to broadcast out to the rest of the organization? That should be the last question in every single retrospective. And just like when you're in Vegas, things start to leak out, even though that policy of what happens in Vegas, true with retros too. But do it in a more intentional way. Now, the way that you can do that is through something called a retrospective radiator. I encourage you to hang these outside of your team rooms, where you classify all of the intentionally broadcasted artifacts coming out of your retrospective to the rest of the organization. They can be learnings, things that can help other teams. They can be hypotheses that you're working on that you think could benefit from other team involvement. They could be action items you need help on or organizational impediments you need to broadcast. This has power, but imagine if it's not just one team that's hanging a retrospective radiator in your room, but now it's all 500 in your company. And you're going from one meeting to the next. And normally, that would be 10 minutes of wasted time. But as you're passing by other team rooms, you'll be able to inspect these radiators just kind of in a glance and start to see the trends around the organization of what's working and what's not. There is incredible power there that we are not tapping into as an industry enough. The thing is, that's not good enough either, because as I said before, there are two rules to employee voice. Rule 1 is feedback has to be regular. We're achieving that. Rule 2, though, is that responses have to be timely and impactful. So how does that come into play? There's a feedback loop that you need to make sure you institute at your company. At the top, teams are running retrospectives, and they're solving the problems they can. Those that they can't, they broadcast on their radiators out to the rest of the organization. Agile coaches and others who have cross-sectional view should be inspecting those radiators to identify the themes that are occurring, problems that are occurring across the company. Those should bubble up to management, and management should close that feedback loop back to the team level in a short cycle time. I'm not talking about a year, 6 months, a quarter, or even a month. I'm talking about short. Doesn't mean they have to fix every problem. They could very well say, the impact is that you don't quite understand how that would affect the whole organization, so I'm going to talk to you about that. That's impact. But the response has to come down the chain. And if you do that, retrospectives will actually give people a voice, which will actually encourage engagement, which will allow you to achieve the business agility you all are after. Thank you very much.
Thank you.